The great council chamber of Aeon had stood for over 3 centuries, its walls constructed from the same dark stone as the palace itself, its ceiling supported by pillars carved with the images of every king and queen who had ruled the kingdom since its founding. It was here, beneath the watchful stone gazes of ancestors long past, that the most significant decisions affecting Aeon's future had traditionally been debated and resolved. Daniel arrived early that morning, well before the session's scheduled start, finding the chamber still empty save for the palace steward arranging the ceremonial seating according to rank and precedence. He walked slowly among the rows of carved wooden benches, remembering childhood days spent watching council sessions from the gallery above, never imagining that he himself would one day stand at the center of such contentious debate. "You are troubled," a familiar voice said from the chamber's entrance. Daniel turned to find his father approaching, already dressed in the formal ceremonial robes reserved for significant council sessions, his crown resting heavy upon his brow. "I confess I am, Father," Daniel admitted. "I have attended countless council sessions throughout my life, but never one where my own future, and Naomi's, hung so entirely in the balance. This is not merely about you and Naomi any longer, Daniel," the king said, moving to stand beside his son. "This is about the precedent we establish for future generations, about whether this kingdom values genuine character and love above rigid adherence to tradition for tradition's own sake. Whatever happens today, know that your mother and I stand firmly behind your decision, regardless of whatever opposition Chief Eberechi and his allies might mount." "Thank you, Father. That support means more to me than I can adequately express. Save your gratitude for after we have successfully navigated today's proceedings," the king said, though a faint smile softened his otherwise serious expression. "Chief Eberechi will not surrender easily, Daniel. Prepare yourself for a difficult, contentious session." As the morning progressed, the council chamber gradually filled with its full complement of ministers, chiefs, and advisors, each arriving in the formal attire appropriate to such significant proceedings. Queen Adiz arrived shortly before the session's official start, accompanied by Naomi, who had been carefully prepared for this moment through hours of the previous evening's coaching regarding proper conduct, appropriate responses, and the delicate balance between humility and dignity that the queen believed would prove most persuasive to the assembled council. Naomi wore a gown the queen herself had selected, elegant but not ostentatious, rich in fabric but modest in design, meant to convey both respect for the occasion's formality and an appropriate humility given her uncertain status within this assembly. Her hair had been carefully arranged, her posture coached to project confidence without arrogance, dignity without presumption. Whispers rippled through the assembled council as Naomi entered alongside the queen, curious and assessing eyes tracking her every movement as she took her seat in a position designated for honored guests rather than full council members, a careful diplomatic choice that acknowledged her significance to the proceedings without presuming upon status not yet formally granted. Zara sat among her family's traditional seating, her expression carefully composed into something approaching serene confidence, though Daniel, watching from his own position near his parents' thrones, recognized the tension evident in the rigid set of her shoulders, the tight grip of her hands folded in her lap. Chief Eberechi rose first once the formal proceedings had officially commenced, his voice carrying clearly throughout the stone chamber as he addressed the assembled council. "Distinguished members of this council," he began, "I have called for this session to address a matter of grave significance to the future stability and traditional integrity of our beloved kingdom. It has come to my attention, and indeed to the attention of much of our kingdom's population, that Prince Daniel has fathered a child with a young woman of common birth, and that the palace intend to legitimize this union through formal marriage, elevating this young woman to the position of future queen." Murmurs rippled through the assembled council, though most present had already heard some version of these events through the palace's persistent rumor networks. "I do not raise this matter," Eberechi continued, "to cause the royal family embarrassment, nor to diminish whatever genuine affection may exist between Prince Daniel and this young woman. However, I believe this council bears solemn responsibility to consider the broader implications of legitimizing such a union, implications that extend far beyond the personal happiness of two individuals to encompass the very foundations of stability and tradition upon which our kingdom's continued prosperity depends. He paused, allowing his words appropriate weight before continuing. I would remind this council of the precedent established 50 years ago, during the reign of King Obina's own grandfather, when a similar situation arose involving a servant girl and the crown prince of that era. This council, in its wisdom, ruled decisively against legitimizing that union, recognizing the fundamental importance of maintaining proper alliance structures essential to our kingdom's continued stability. Minister Chukwu rose to support his ally's position. Chief Eberechi speaks wisely, honored council. We must consider not merely the immediate circumstances before us, but the precedent we establish for all future generations. If a servant girl may simply capture royal favor through momentary passion, elevating herself to queenship without the traditional preparation, alliance, and formal agreement our institutions have always required, what does that suggest about the strength and integrity of those very institutions? King Obina listened to these arguments with careful attention, his expression revealing little of his own thoughts as the council chamber's debate continued to unfold. He had anticipated much of this opposition, had discussed strategy extensively with his wife the previous evening, and now waited for the appropriate moment to offer his own counterargument. That moment arrived once Chief Eberechi and his allies had concluded their initial presentation, the king rising slowly from his throne to address the assembled council with a measured authority that had characterized his 3 decades of leadership. Honored council, he began, I have listened carefully to the concerns Chief Eberechi and his allies have raised, and I acknowledge the genuine weight of tradition and precedent underlying their arguments. However, I would ask this council to consider several important distinctions between the historical precedent cited and the circumstances currently before us. He paused, surveying the assembled ministers and chiefs with a steady gaze that had commanded respect throughout his reign. First, I would note that the precedent Chief Eberechi references occurred during a considerably different era of our kingdom's history, when circumstances of birth and social standing carried different weight and significance than they perhaps carry today. Our kingdom has evolved considerably across the past 5 decades, embracing modernization in commerce, in education, in diplomatic relations with neighboring territories. Should our approach to matters of succession and marriage remain entirely static while every other aspect of our society continues to evolve? Tradition exists precisely because certain principles remain constant regardless of surrounding circumstances. Your Majesty, Minister Okoro interjected. The importance of proper alliance, of ensuring our future queens possess the preparation and understanding necessary to navigate the complex responsibilities of royal governance, does not diminish simply because commerce or education happens to modernize. A fair point, Minister Okoro, the king acknowledged, though I would counter that preparation for royal responsibility need not be limited exclusively to those born into privileged circumstances. Character, wisdom, and genuine dedication to the well-being of our people can be cultivated regardless of one's birth, given appropriate time and guidance. He gestured toward Naomi, who sat rigid with anxiety but maintaining the composed dignity the queen had carefully coached her to project. I would ask this council to consider the character of the young woman before us, rather than dismissing her worthiness based solely upon circumstances of birth she had no control over. Naomi has demonstrated remarkable courage throughout this entire difficult situation, choosing honesty over concealment, choosing to face this council's judgment directly rather than fleeing from the scrutiny and difficulty her circumstances have created. Minister Basie, who had remained largely silent throughout the initial debate, rose now to offer his own perspective, his reputation for careful, thoughtful judgment lending particular weight to whatever position he ultimately chose to support. Honored council, he began, I have known Prince Daniel since his childhood, have watched him grow from an inquisitive young boy into a thoughtful, dedicated man committed genuinely to the future prosperity of our kingdom. I do not believe he would make a decision of this magnitude carelessly or without extensive consideration of its full implications. He turned toward Naomi directly. Young woman, I would ask you directly, what do you believe you bring to this kingdom? Should this council ultimately approve your marriage to Prince Daniel? What qualities do you possess that might justify the trust this position would require? Naomi felt every eye in the chamber turn toward her, felt her heart pounding as she rose slowly from her seat, remembering the queen's careful coaching from the previous evening, remembering Daniel's steady encouragement, remembering most of all her own genuine convictions about what she hoped to offer this kingdom should she be granted the opportunity. "Honored Minister," she began, her voice trembling slightly but growing steadier as she continued, "I was born to a fisherman and his wife, raised along the riverbanks of this very kingdom, taught from childhood the value of hard work, of honesty, of caring genuinely for one's community and neighbors. I did not grow up with wealth or privilege, but I grew up understanding the daily struggles and hopes of common people throughout Ion. Struggles and hopes that I believe are sometimes overlooked or forgotten within these palace walls, however well-intentioned this council's governance might ultimately be." She paused, gathering her courage before continuing. "I love Prince Daniel not for his crown, not for the wealth or status his position might provide me, but for his genuine character, his kindness, his dedication to justice, his willingness to listen carefully to people regardless of their social standing. I believe that love, combined with my own understanding of common life throughout this kingdom, might allow me to serve as a bridge between this palace and the people it governs, ensuring that future policies and decisions remain genuinely connected to the daily realities of those they most directly affect." Murmurs rippled through the council once more, though these carried a different quality than the earlier skeptical whispers, something approaching genuine consideration, perhaps even grudging respect for the conviction evident in Naomi's words. Chief Eberechi, sensing the tide of council opinion potentially shifting away from his favor, rose quickly to counter this momentum. "Beautiful words, young woman, but words alone do not qualify someone for the complex responsibilities of royal governance. Have you received any formal education in diplomacy, in economics, in the intricate politics of managing relationships with neighboring kingdoms? Or do you propose to learn these essential skills through mere trial and error, at potentially significant cost to our kingdom's stability and prosperity?" "I have not received formal education in these specific areas," Chief Eberechi, Naomi acknowledged honestly, though I would note that education can be pursued and acquired regardless of one's starting circumstances, given appropriate dedication and opportunity. "I do not claim to already possess every skill this position might require. I claim only genuine commitment to learning whatever is necessary, combined with the fundamental character and values I believe are equally essential to effective, compassionate governance." "Commendable ambition," Eberechi said, though his tone carried clear skepticism. "But ambition alone has rarely proven sufficient preparation for the genuine complexities of royal responsibility. My own daughter Zara has spent her entire life preparing specifically for this role, receiving extensive education in diplomacy, economics, and governance from the finest tutors our kingdom and neighboring territories can provide. Are we truly prepared to set aside such thorough preparation in favor of mere good intentions and genuine but untested character?" Queen Adiz, who had remained silent throughout much of the debate, allowing her husband and Naomi to make their own cases before the council, finally rose to offer her own perspective. "Honored council," she said, her voice carrying the particular authority earned through 3 decades of visible, effective governance alongside her husband, "I would remind this assembly that formal education, however valuable, represents only one component of effective leadership. I have observed Naomi closely these past several days, have witnessed her character tested under considerable pressure and scrutiny, and I can attest personally to the genuine wisdom, courage, and compassion she has consistently demonstrated throughout this difficult situation." She paused, surveying the council with a steady confidence that had made her such an effective queen throughout her reign. "I would also note that formal education in diplomacy and governance, while valuable, can indeed be acquired after marriage, through careful mentorship and dedicated study, as many previous queens throughout our kingdom's history have themselves undertaken. What cannot be so easily taught or acquired, however, is genuine character, genuine compassion, genuine commitment to the well-being of our people above personal ambition or comfort. These qualities, I believe, Naomi has demonstrated in abundance. The debate continued for several more hours, various council members offering their own perspectives, questioning Naomi further on various aspects of governance and leadership, probing for weaknesses in her character or preparation that might justify continued opposition to her potential marriage to Daniel. Throughout this extensive questioning, Naomi maintained the composed dignity and honest conviction that had characterized her initial statement, neither claiming false expertise she did not possess nor allowing the sometimes hostile questioning to shake her fundamental confidence in her own character and worthiness. Finally, as the afternoon light began slanting lower through the chamber's high windows, King Obinna called for a formal vote among the assembled council members, understanding that further debate would likely yield little additional clarity beyond what had already been thoroughly explored. Council members, he announced, we have heard extensive arguments both supporting and opposing the legitimization of Prince Daniel's marriage to Naomi and the eventual succession rights of their child. I now call for formal vote. Those in favor of granting formal council approval and support for this marriage, please indicate your position. A tense silence fell across the chamber as council members considered their final positions, weighing the various arguments and counter-arguments they had spent the entire day debating. Slowly, hands began rising throughout the assembly. Minister Basie first, his respected judgment lending early momentum to the supportive position, followed gradually by several other ministers who had seemed genuinely moved by Naomi's testimony and the Queen's passionate advocacy on her behalf. Chief Eberechi watched with mounting alarm as the count of supportive votes continued climbing, recognizing that his carefully constructed opposition was proving less effective than he had anticipated against the combined advocacy of the king, queen, and Naomi's own genuine, unrehearsed conviction. When the final count was tallied, the council chamber fell into a different kind of silence. Not the tense anticipation that had preceded the vote, but something approaching stunned recognition of a decisive outcome. The majority of council members had voted in favor of supporting Daniel and Naomi's marriage, recognizing the child's legitimate succession rights, though a significant minority, led predictably by Chief Eberechi and his closest allies, had maintained their opposition throughout the final vote. The council has spoken, King Obinna announced, his voice carrying clear relief and satisfaction despite his careful maintenance of formal dignity appropriate to the occasion. By majority vote, this council formally recognizes and supports the marriage of Prince Daniel to Naomi and grants full legitimate succession rights to their child, regardless of gender, as befits the natural order of royal inheritance within our kingdom. Naomi felt tears of relief and gratitude filling her eyes as the weight of this decision settled fully upon her, understanding that whatever difficulties still lay ahead, the most immediate and crucial battle had been decisively won. Daniel moved quickly to her side, taking her hand in his own despite the formal setting, his own expression radiant with the same overwhelming relief and joy coursing through her. Chief Eberechi rose stiffly from his seat, his expression carefully composed despite the evident bitterness of this defeat. I accept this council's decision, he said formally, though his tone carried little genuine acceptance beneath its diplomatic surface, though I maintain my personal reservations regarding the wisdom of this precedent for our kingdom's future stability. He turned and departed the chamber without further ceremony, Zara rising quickly to follow her father's retreating figure, her own expression carefully neutral despite the visible tension in her rigid posture. As she passed near where Naomi and Daniel stood together, she paused briefly, her eyes meeting Naomi's own with an expression that promised this defeat, however decisive, would not mark the end of whatever opposition she and her family intended to continue mounting against this unexpected turn of events. Congratulations, Zara said, her voice carrying icy formality rather than genuine warmth, on your victory today. Enjoy it while it lasts. She continued past without waiting for any response, leaving Naomi with a lingering unease despite the day's overwhelming triumph, understanding intuitively that Zara's parting words carried genuine threat rather than mere bitter posturing. But for now, at least, that concern remained secondary to the overwhelming relief and joy of the council's decisive support. As the chamber gradually emptied, King Obinna and Queen Adiz approached Daniel and Naomi together, their expressions carrying genuine warmth and pride despite the formal setting. "You conducted yourself admirably today, Naomi," the king said, his tone carrying genuine respect rather than mere diplomatic courtesy. "This council does not easily grant such decisive support, particularly given the unconventional circumstances of your background. You have earned this victory through genuine character, not mere fortune or manipulation." "Thank you, Your Majesty," Naomi said, her voice still slightly unsteady with emotion. "I could not have achieved this without your support, and the Queen's and Daniel's unwavering commitment throughout this entire difficult process. We have achieved this together," Queen Adiz corrected gently, "as a family, united despite whatever obstacles opposition might have placed before us. This is merely the first significant victory, however, in what will likely prove a longer journey toward full acceptance throughout our kingdom." Chief Eberechi's opposition, though defeated today, has not entirely disappeared. "I understand, my queen," Naomi said. "I am prepared to continue proving my worthiness for whatever position this marriage ultimately grants me." Daniel squeezed her hand gently, his expression carrying deep affection and pride as he regarded the woman who had faced such intense scrutiny and opposition with remarkable grace and conviction. "Whatever challenges remain ahead, Naomi, we face them together, as we have faced everything since this entire journey began." As the small family group finally departed the great council chamber, the setting sun cast long golden shadows across Aeon's palace grounds, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and crimson that seemed to promise, however tentatively, that perhaps genuine love and character might indeed prove capable of overcoming even the most deeply entrenched traditions and opposition, given sufficient courage, patience, and unwavering commitment to truth over mere convenient convention. Yet even as this quiet moment of triumph settled over the small family, none among them could have anticipated the far more elaborate and dangerous schemes that Chief Eberechi and his daughter Zora had already begun constructing in the wake of their unexpected defeat, schemes that would soon test not merely Naomi's resolve and character, but the very safety and stability of the family and kingdom she now found herself unexpectedly, irrevocably bound to protect. 3 weeks passed following the council's decisive ruling, weeks during which Aeon settled into a fragile, uneasy peace. The formal announcement of Naomi's engagement to Prince Daniel had been made throughout the kingdom, accompanied by careful diplomatic messaging crafted jointly by the king, queen, and their most trusted advisors, designed to frame the unconventional union in terms the broader population might more readily embrace. The response, as anticipated, remained mixed. Many among the common people, particularly those from humbler circumstances similar to Naomi's own upbringing, celebrated the news with genuine enthusiasm, viewing it as evidence that their kingdom's leadership remained connected to and respectful of ordinary citizens rather than existing in isolated privilege. Others, particularly among the more traditional and aristocratic segments of Aeon's population, continued expressing skepticism and concern, their whispered doubts echoing the same arguments Chief Eberechi had presented before the council. Naomi herself had settled into a new rhythm within palace life, gradually growing more comfortable with her changing status, though the transition remained far from seamless. Queen Adiz had assigned her a tutor, an elderly scholar named Professor Adiemi who had once served as advisor to 3 previous monarchs, tasked specifically with providing Naomi accelerated education in matters of diplomacy, economics, and governance that Chief Eberechi had correctly identified as areas requiring significant development. "You possess natural intelligence and instinct, my dear," Professor Adiemi told her during one of their daily lessons, held in a quiet study overlooking the palace's eastern gardens. "What you lack is not capability, but simply exposure and practice. These skills, unlike character itself, can indeed be taught and developed with sufficient dedication." "I am grateful for your patience, Professor," Naomi said, studying the complex trade agreement document spread before her, attempting to understand the intricate balance of tariffs, exports, and diplomatic considerations that governed Aeon's relationships with neighboring territories. "Some days I feel as though I am attempting to learn an entirely foreign language." "In many ways, you are," the professor acknowledged with a gentle smile. "But you learn quickly." my day. Far more quickly than many students I have taught throughout my long career, including some who arrived with considerably more formal education than you currently possess. Despite this encouraging progress, Naomi remained acutely aware that her education alone would not resolve the deeper political tensions still simmering beneath Aeon's fragile surface calm. Chief Eberechi, though publicly accepting the council's decision, had retreated from open opposition into something far more concerning, a careful, patient silence that Naomi's growing political instincts recognized as far more dangerous than his earlier, more transparent hostility. "He is planning something," she confided to Daniel one evening, as they walked together through the palace gardens following her daily lesson with Professor Adeyemi. "I can sense it, Daniel, though I cannot yet identify precisely what form his response might take." "My father has expressed similar concerns," Daniel admitted, his expression troubled. Chief Eberechi is not a man accustomed to accepting defeat gracefully, regardless of how diplomatically he might present his public acceptance of the council's ruling. "What do you believe he might attempt?" Daniel considered this carefully as they continued their slow walk beneath the flowering trees that lined the garden's central pathway. "I'm uncertain precisely, but knowing his character, I suspect he will not attempt anything so direct as further public opposition. He has already lost that particular battle decisively. More likely, he will pursue subtler methods, perhaps attempting to discredit you personally, to manufacture scandal or doubt regarding your character that might erode public support even without formally challenging the council's ruling." "That seems consistent with Zara's parting words following the council session," Naomi said, remembering the young woman's icy warning with lingering unease. She promised this defeat would not mark the end of their opposition. "We must remain vigilant," Daniel agreed, "though I do not wish this concern to overshadow what should otherwise prove a joyful period of preparation for our upcoming marriage. We cannot allow Chief Eberechi's potential future scheming to poison every moment of happiness we might otherwise experience during this time." Naomi nodded, though the underlying anxiety remained present despite Daniel's reasonable counsel. She placed her hand gently against her stomach, now beginning to show the first subtle signs of her advancing pregnancy, and found herself wondering what particular challenges still awaited both herself and the child she carried before this entire complicated situation finally reached some form of stable resolution. Chief Eberechi's patience, as it turned out, was indeed being employed toward considerably more elaborate scheming than either Daniel or Naomi had initially anticipated. Rather than pursuing further direct political opposition, which had already proven ineffective against the council's decisive ruling, he had instead begun cultivating a different, more insidious strategy, one designed to undermine Naomi's position through careful manipulation of public perception and, if necessary, more direct sabotage of her personal safety and reputation. "Father," Zara said one evening, joining him in his private study where he had spent considerable time these past weeks reviewing correspondence and meeting privately with various allies throughout the kingdom, "I grow impatient with this waiting. Every day that passes, Naomi grows more comfortable within the palace, more accepted by the common people, more secure in her position as Daniel's future wife." "Patience, my daughter," Eberechi counseled, not looking up from the document he had been carefully studying. "Hasty action born of frustration rarely achieves lasting success. We must move deliberately, ensuring that whatever strategy we ultimately pursue proves both effective and, crucially, untraceable back to our own involvement." "What strategy do you propose?" Eberechi finally set aside his document, regarding his daughter with the calculating expression that had made him such an effective political operator throughout his long career. "I have been in correspondence with several contacts within neighboring territories, Zara, individuals who owe me significant favors accumulated across many years of careful diplomatic cultivation. Among these contacts is a woman named Fatima, who possesses particular skills in matters requiring discretion." "What manner of discretion?" "Fatima specializes in gathering information others prefer remain hidden," Eberechi explained. "I have tasked her with investigating Naomi's background more thoroughly than our own initial inquiries managed to achieve. Every person carries secrets, Zara," particularly those who emerge from humble circumstances into sudden prominence. I suspect strongly that Naomi's own history contains elements that, properly revealed and framed, might significantly undermine the sympathetic narrative currently surrounding her rise to royal favor. Zara's expression sharpened with interest. What have you discovered thus far? Preliminary reports suggest interesting complications, Eberechi said, a thin smile crossing his features. It appears Naomi was previously engaged, briefly, to a young fisherman from her home village, an engagement that ended somewhat abruptly under circumstances our investigator has not yet fully clarified. Additionally, there are suggestions that Naomi's family carries significant debts to local merchants, debts that predate her arrival at the palace and remain, as far as we can determine, entirely unresolved. How might we best utilize this information? Carefully, Eberechi cautioned. We cannot simply present unverified rumors to the council or broader public without risking accusations of malicious fabrication, particularly given our own transparent opposition to this marriage. Instead, we must allow this information to emerge gradually, seemingly organically, through channels that cannot be directly traced back to our own involvement. And if this information alone proves insufficient to derail their marriage, Eberechi's expression grew colder, more calculating. Then we shall consider additional measures, Zara. I have not spent decades building this kingdom's political landscape simply to watch a fisherman's daughter claim what should rightfully belong to our family through generations of careful cultivation and preparation. Whatever measures prove necessary to prevent that outcome, I am prepared to pursue them, regardless of whatever moral complications such measures might ultimately require. The first evidence of this renewed scheming manifested itself roughly a week later, when whispers began circulating once more throughout Aeon's capital. Different in nature from the earlier gossip regarding Naomi's pregnancy, now focusing instead on supposed revelations about her character and past conduct. Did you hear? One market vendor murmured to another during their morning trading, that the fisherman's daughter was previously engaged to another man, before she ever caught the prince's eye? They say she abandoned him rather suddenly, once opportunity for something grander presented itself. I heard something similar, the other vendor replied, though I also heard her family carries substantial debts throughout the village, debts they have conveniently ignored since her sudden elevation to royal favor. One wonders whether her family's poverty played some role in encouraging her pursuit of the prince's attention. Such conversations spread with troubling speed throughout the kingdom, each retelling adding fresh embellishment and speculation to whatever kernel of truth might exist within the original reports. By the time these rumors reached the palace itself, they had transformed considerably from Chief Eberechi's carefully cultivated initial revelations into something far more damaging and distorted. Naomi first became aware of this renewed gossip through Ephema, the young maid who had proven herself a reliable, sympathetic source of information throughout the palace's constant undercurrent of rumor and speculation. Miss Naomi, Ephema said one morning, finding Naomi alone in the palace library where she often studied between her lessons with Professor Adeyemi, I must speak with you regarding troubling rumors currently circulating throughout the kingdom. What manner of rumors? Naomi asked, setting aside the diplomatic history she had been studying, immediately sensing genuine concern in Ephema's expression. They speak of a previous engagement, Miss Naomi, to a fisherman from your home village. They also speak of significant debts your family supposedly carries, debts they suggest may have motivated your pursuit of Prince Daniel's affection. Naomi felt her stomach tighten with dread, understanding immediately the source of such carefully targeted revelations. These rumors are not entirely without foundation, Ephema, though they distort the truth considerably from what actually transpired. What is the truth, if I may ask, Miss Naomi? I ask not from mere curiosity, but because understanding the accurate account might help me better counter these distorted versions when I encounter them among the other staff. Naomi considered carefully before responding, recognizing both the genuine sympathy Ephema had consistently demonstrated and the practical value of ensuring at least some accurate information circulated to counter whatever distorted narrative Chief Eberechi's agents had begun constructing. When I was younger, she began, before I ever met Daniel, My family did indeed arrange a potential engagement with a young fisherman named Emeka, son of a family well known throughout our village. This was not uncommon practice among fishing communities, where such arrangements often serve practical purposes beyond mere romantic affection, combining family resources, strengthening community bonds, ensuring mutual support during difficult seasons. What happened to this arrangement? Emeka's family ultimately withdrew their support for the match. Naomi continued, not because of any fault of my own, but because my father's fishing business had suffered several difficult seasons, leaving us with debts that Emeka's family deemed too significant a burden to accept through marriage. The engagement was dissolved by mutual agreement, though I confess the experience left me with considerable pain and humiliation at the time. And the debts themselves remain largely unresolved. Yes, Naomi acknowledged. My father has struggled considerably these past several years, and our family's finances have never fully recovered from that difficult period. This is not something I have hidden deliberately, Ephema, but simply a private family matter I had not previously found reason to discuss openly within palace circles. I understand, Miss Naomi. Though I fear these rumors, however distorted from the actual truth, may prove considerably damaging if allowed to spread unchecked throughout the kingdom, particularly combined with suggestions that your family's financial difficulties somehow motivated your relationship with Prince Daniel. Naomi nodded grimly, understanding the genuine danger this renewed gossip campaign represented to the fragile public acceptance she had worked so diligently to cultivate since the council's initial ruling. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Ephema. I must discuss this matter immediately with the Queen and with Daniel. Queen Adiz received this news with the same calculating seriousness she had demonstrated throughout every previous crisis this unconventional situation had generated. She summoned Daniel immediately to her private study, along with Naomi, understanding that swift, coordinated response would prove essential to containing whatever damage these renewed rumors might otherwise cause. This bears Chief Eberech's particular signature, the Queen said, once Naomi had relayed the full details Ephema had shared. Careful, calculated, designed specifically to raise doubt regarding your character motivations without directly violating the council's formal ruling. How do we counter such rumors effectively? Daniel asked, particularly given that they contain elements of truth, however distorted in their broader framing. We must address them directly and honestly, the Queen said decisively, rather than allowing speculation and rumor to continue filling the gaps in public understanding. Naomi, I believe the time has come for you to speak publicly regarding your background, your family circumstances, and your genuine history, presenting the accurate truth before Chief Eberech's distorted version further poisons public perception. You wish me to address this publicly? Naomi asked, alarm evident in her expression at the prospect of such direct exposure. I understand this prospect likely fills you with considerable anxiety, the Queen acknowledged, but I believe direct honesty, presented with appropriate dignity and context, will prove far more effective than allowing rumor and speculation to continue shaping public perception unchecked. You have nothing genuinely shameful to hide, Naomi. A broken engagement due to financial circumstances, a family struggling with debt during difficult seasons. These are common struggles many throughout our kingdom have themselves experienced or witnessed among their own communities. Presented honestly, without shame or defensive evasion, I believe this information might actually strengthen rather than weaken public sympathy for your circumstances. Daniel considered his mother's counsel carefully before adding his own perspective. I agree with my mother's assessment, Naomi. Chief Eberech's strategy depends upon creating doubt and speculation through carefully filtered, distorted information. If we instead present the complete, honest truth directly, we remove much of the power his manipulation currently holds. What would such a public address entail? Naomi asked, still visibly anxious despite the reasonable logic underlying their counsel. Perhaps a carefully arranged audience with key community leaders and influential figures throughout the kingdom, Queen Adiz suggested, where you might share your background directly, allowing them opportunity to ask questions and receive honest, transparent answers rather than relying solely upon whatever distorted rumors continue circulating through less reliable channels. Naomi took a deep breath, gathering her courage once more as she had done so many times throughout these past challenging weeks. If you both believe this represents the wisest path forward, I am prepared to speak publicly regarding my background and family circumstances, however uncomfortable that prospect might initially appear. Good, the Queen said, satisfaction evident in her tone. I will begin arranging appropriate circumstances for such an address within the coming days. In the meantime, we must also address the matter of your family's outstanding debts directly, ensuring this particular vulnerability cannot be further exploited by Chief Eberechi or his allies. What do you propose regarding my family's debts, my queen? The palace treasury shall settle these debts entirely, Adiz said decisively. Not as charity, but as appropriate support for the family of Aeon's future queen. This eliminates one significant vulnerability Chief Eberechi's scheming has attempted to exploit, while simultaneously demonstrating the palace's genuine commitment to supporting you and your family throughout this transition. Naomi felt tears of gratitude filling her eyes once more at this generous gesture. Thank you, my queen. I do not know how I might ever adequately repay such kindness. You repay this kindness, the queen said gently, by continuing to demonstrate the genuine character and dedication you have shown throughout this entire difficult process, by proving yourself worthy of the trust and support this family and kingdom have extended toward you, and eventually, by ruling wisely and compassionately alongside my son when that day finally arrives. As their conversation concluded and practical arrangements began taking shape for both settling Naomi's family debts and organizing her upcoming public address, none among them could yet know that Chief Eberechi's carefully cultivated scheme had already progressed considerably beyond mere rumor and speculation, into territory that would soon threaten not merely Naomi's reputation, but her very physical safety within the palace walls. She had only recently begun to consider something approaching. A genuine home.